How do the Dallas Cowboys keep doing this? So we're gonna be going through that and 5 other stories in today's video. So make sure to like this video, and if you want more Dallas Cowboys news content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel hitting that red button down below. The first story is Cowboys could add Vikings star RB for cheap in NFL draft trade. As the Dallas Cowboys prepare the next step of their offseason with the NFL draft, a Minnesota Vikings star is being linked to a trade with Dallas. The Cowboys' first pick in this year's draft comes at the number 26 spot, but they may not have to worry about moving around based on an estimated price for Vikings RB Dalvin Cook. Kenneth Teep and Mike Fisher recently explored a possible trade for the 4-time Pro Bowler, which comes at a seemingly cheap price, a 4th-round pick and a small 6th-round shuffle. Knowing there is a chance that Cook will be released, the trade offers coming in won't be overly aggressive. Dallas could offer their 4th-round pick, number 129 overall, and 5th-round pick, number 169, in exchange for Cook and Minnesota's 6th-round pick, number 211. Teep wrote, "The idea of adding someone of Cook's caliber for a 4th-round pick is tempting. Cooks is one of the most decorated backs in the NFL. However, there are also clear red flags and limitations that would make this move a difficult decision, and potentially the wrong one as well. Typically, players who are coming off their 4th consecutive Pro Bowl season aren't transfer block material. The issue for the Vikings hasn't been Cook's productivity, but rather his contract. Over the past 4 seasons, Cook's lowest rushing yards total was 1135 in 2019, and that was in 14 games played according to Pro Football Reference. His touchdown numbers have gone down in the past 2 years, but his production is still at an elite level. What makes Cook's situation somewhat difficult to judge is the presence of Alexander Mattison. The Vikings have a second productive back in Mattison, and he has both given some rest to Cook but also cut into his production. Having Mattison is a key reason why Cook could be cut or traded, partially thanks to his cheap salary. Cooks, on the other hand, is a negative and something the Cowboys could view as a deal-breaker for a trade. Cowboys, coin and trade. When the Cowboys released running back Ezekiel Elliott earlier this offseason, the primary reason was that he was not worth his production. Even with Cook hitting the 1,000-plus mark on rushing yards, it's hard to say he's worth a trade either. According to Spotrac, Cook is due another $11 million this season and another $12.5 million next year. That's fairly close to Elliott's deal, who is actually the same age as Cook. Cook is producing at a high level, but questions about his longevity have to be asked. If the Cowboys did trade for Cook, they would be paying him and RB Tony Pollard around $22 million for 2023. No team in the NFL is spending that much money on running backs, regardless of talent. Further, Dallas can just wait and see. The Vikings may find a trade partner for Cook, but if the Cowboys and the rest of the NFL believe he will be cut if a trade doesn't materialize, then there is no rush. Cook would be a game-changing addition, but the fact that he could be cut after the NFL draft means Dallas would be better served to wait and see if they can sign him on a cheaper free agent deal. The second story is Dallas Cowboys coaches reportedly disagree on 1st-round pick. Heading into this year's NFL draft, there have been a lot of options that have been thrown around for who the Dallas Cowboys could take in the 1st round. At one point, there was talk about Bijan Robinson replacing Ezekiel Elliott. They could bring in an offensive lineman to bolster an aging unit that has a hole at left guard. Linebacker and defensive tackle are also a couple of positions they could look to improve in the draft. However, there are 2 other positions that the Cowboys are currently having a disagreement over for their first pick in the draft. According to NFL Network's Jane Slater, head coach Mike McCarthy wants the team to draft a tight end while defensive coordinator Dan Quinn wants a nickel corner. Tight end is a position that has been one of the frontrunners for this pick for the Cowboys. They lost Dalton Schultz to free agency this offseason and don't have a clear replacement. There are also a couple of great options at the position in this draft. They could draft a new Dalton in Utah's Dalton Kincaid, or they could take Notre Dame's Michael Mayer. This draft also has a lot of talent at cornerback. Devin Witherspoon and Christian Gonzalez are both projected to be taken in the top 10. In the Cowboys' range, they could look at Joey Porter Jr. or Deont Banks. The third story is drafting Mazi Smith wasn't sexy, but Cowboys have earned the benefit of the doubt. Frisco, a little of the conventional wisdom fizzled out of the NFL draft Thursday when Atlanta took Bijan Robinson with the 8th pick, and the Lions came back 4 slots later to snap up Jahmyr Gibbs of Alabama. 2 running backs in the first dozen. What is this? 1981. Turns out it's 1991. Or so the Cowboys hope. He'd better, because Notre Dame's Michael Mayer, considered the most complete tight end in the draft, sat front and center at 26, waiting for his phone to ring. ESPN's production crew seemed so sure the Cowboys would make the call, it provided viewers a side-by-side comparison with Jason Witten. Nolan Smith, the Georgia linebacker, was also still on the board, and if you really wanted to think outside the box, so was Will Levis, the rocket-armed Kentucky quarterback. For that matter, Stephen Jones said they had 2 or 3 guys rated about the same as Smith. Prompted a good debate, he said. Probably not as much as he indicated, though, because what became clear late Thursday night was that the Cowboys wanted to fix their defense, and if a defensive tackle isn't exactly sexy, it's sound football strategy, which hasn't always been Jerry's strong point in the war room. Remember when he admonished Stephen that passing up Johnny Manziel to take Zach Martin was hitting it down the middle? The Wildcatter in Jerry still itches for the big play. 10 years ago, he said Thursday, he probably wouldn't have picked Smith. But a lot has changed in the Cowboys' draft room over the last decade, most of it for the better. Jerry trusts Will McClay, so should you. He's been right more often than not since taking over the draft in 2014. He was right last year about Tyler Smith, an offensive tackle out of Tulsa mostly famous for leading all of college football in penalties. All Smith did as a rookie was bump Tyron Smith to the other side of the offensive line. Could Mazi Smith make the same kind of immediate impact? He's got all the tools you want in a defensive tackle. Big, nimble, smart. Next-gen stats ranked him second only to Georgia's Jalen Carter in athleticism among DTs, even if his production didn't live up to it. NFL.com's Lance Zierlein, who's been doing his thing a long time, compares Smith to Dontari Poe, a brick wall in his prime. The fourth story is Jerry Jones admits Cowboys drafted Zeke too high. The Dallas Cowboys held their pre-draft press conference with head coach Mike McCarthy, owner and GM Jerry Jones, and Chief Operating Officer Stephen Jones on Monday, April 24th. While discussing the probabilities and different possibilities of the draft, Jerry Jones made some interesting comments about former Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott. There's a bunch of nuances that go into this running back conversation. When you start loading up, Zeke's a good football player, still a very outstanding, I'm going to say the word outstanding football player. He's too high for us where he was. So, that has a lot to do with this conversation about running back right now with us, said Jones. While Jones made these comments not to disparage Elliott, he made it clear that the Cowboys aren't looking to take a running back in the first round. Bad news for Bijan Robinson fans, as Jones's comments seem to point the Cowboys in a different direction. The question now is, who will the Cowboys draft in the first round? Dak Prescott could use some help from playmakers on the outside. Dallas recently picked up Ceedee Lamb's fifth-year option, but young talent at the wide receiver position would be welcome. The Cowboys also need to replace the now Houston Texan Dalton Schultz at tight end. Drafting young players on the offensive line would also be a smart move for Dallas. The fifth story is salary cap, a clear focus for Cowboys roster planning and draft strategy. The Cowboys are a salary cap conscious team. While some teams will eagerly build in free agency and allow their spending to ebb and flow each season, Dallas stays fairly consistent. They aren't an all-in franchise. They are an always-in-the-mix franchise. Right or wrong, it's how the Cowboys are generally operated. In order to achieve this, they are extremely reliant on the NFL draft each year. The budget is based on a certain proportion of rookie contracts populating the ranks. For every high-priced star, they need 4 or 5 players working and contributing on their entry-level salaries. It's not as simple as just re-signing good players. Dallas drafts too efficiently for that. In their minds, they can't afford to re-sign all their good players every year. In order to maintain a healthy bottom line, tough decisions need to be made. Star players like Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Trevon Diggs, and Micah Parsons are all up for new deals in the next 2 years. All 4 will command top-of-the-market money, and all 4 are expected to get that money in Dallas. Where are our priorities, and what can we do with a guy like Ceedee, who we all know what his expectations will be? Stephen Jones said of upcoming contracts. Not unlike Diggs, not unlike, other players, and then you're always factoring in, every team is your quarterback. 4 gargantuan contracts will unavoidably have ramifications to the rest of the roster. It's a reality the Cowboys are well aware of. Stephen Jones went on, as we move forward is a big part of how we figure our salary cap and who we can keep and when are we going to have to make hard decisions to move on. Not unlike we had to do this year with Schultz. No one respects Dalton Schultz more than the Dallas Cowboys. At some point, you have to make those tougher decisions. The Cowboys won big when they added Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot in 2022. Not all day 3 selections and UDFA signings work out like those two did. Their success afforded Dallas the flexibility to move on from Schultz, saving money and moving resources. Looking towards the T-Rich 2023 draft class likely also played a part. Both Jerry and Stephen Jones mentioned the need for young draft picks to step up and assume roles. Jerry pointed to Josh Ball and Matt Wiltsko as 2 players he expects to step up, and Stephen mentioned 2 players who stepped up in the past and why a constant roster churn is part of the Cowboys' strategy. These guys got to step and play at some point, Stephen said. You might have to let like we have the last 2 years with Connor Williams and Connor McGovern, and we thought the world of both those guys. But you can't keep everybody. It's telling, in the last pre-draft presser of the offseason, the Cowboys continuously discussed financial decisions and how money impacts their roster building. They spoke of tough decisions in the past and virtually guaranteed tough decisions in the near future.